All right, we're going to turn this flow into a program. So I'm going to come over to Eclipse. Now I've noticed that when I go to create a new program, it doesn't show you the dialog box in here. So what I need to do is I'm going to show all my windows here. Again, we'll sometimes get a weird screen when I do that, but just for all my windows, there's my editor coming across, but I'm going to come over to Eclipse. And since I'm in chapter 3, I'm going to right click and go to new class. And I'm going to name this program LetterGrade using our naming convention because it's a class, capital L, capital G. And I'm going to include public static void, and I'm going to hit finish. And now we have a place to edit this program. And I'm going to come back here and show this just in Eclipse. All right, so first, our naming conventions, and I'm going to put in that this is for CIS 150 web with Professor Thompson, which is me. Now I'm going to put my name. You'd put your name here. And the date. Oops, 10/6. And then description of the program. Program that displays a letter grade given a numerical grade. And then because I am taking input, I need to import my scanner utility. And so I'm set up ready to start. And what I want to do here then is I want to focus on the initialize scanner and create grade part of the initialization. So we'll initialize variables. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to make a double for the grade. Then I'm going to make a scanner object. We'll continue to use the name input. And so it's a new object of type scanner. And we're going to link it to the keyboard input, which is accessed by system.in. So we now have everything we need memory-wise in this section here. So we will prompt the user for a letter grade or for a numerical grade. So system.out.println, and please enter the numerical grade. And then we'll get the value from the keyboard. And in that case, we're going to make grade equal input.next. And because we're with type double, we'll look for a double. And now we will check the value inputted by the user. And this is the processing part. So this is if we go back to our flow chart, we've come through, we've initialized the scanner object, and we've gotten the grade. And so our processing now is this entire flow chart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an if-else statement to contain this. And then we're going to use a cascading if-else ifs to contain these. So let's check first if the user is right or if the user put in good values. So if grade is greater than or equal to 0, that's our first check And we're going to use a special construct, which I'll introduce in the lecture after this. And now we have to use 2 of the shift 7s to represent and. And what an and wants is both sides of the and statement to be true, and each side is a Boolean statement. And the other side is the grade is less than or equal to 100. And I'm going to immediately start my braces. And notice how Eclipse immediately puts the second brace. And I'm going to come down here and do an else statement. And so what I've done is I've created a space for if this is true and if it is false. And so I have these 2 spaces here. So I'm going to label it. User entered a valid grade value. And I'm going to comment here, user entered an invalid grade value. So we know what our processing is. And I'm going to deal with this one first, because we know that we need some type of error statement. So I'm going to say invalid grade entry. And then below it, on the next line, I'm going to say grades must be between 0 and 100. And so there we have our error statement, or what happens when our user information is false. So we've created the first part. And again, I'm going to go back and look at my branch here, and I've come straight down. I've dealt with what happens if I have a false, I get an error message, and I end. And the ending will happen after this else statement. But what I need to do now is manage the what happens if the grade is good. And so our first if statement was, well, we now know we're between 0 and 100. So we want to know if the grade is greater than or equal to 90. And if that's the case, we'll print out that this was an A. And now Java has a nice construct that if we get multiple if else's, we have a thing called else if. And so this will let me check what on the false level to give me another if statement. So I'm going to put in this construct right now. And we're going to go look back at our flow chart. So let's come over here and look at our Java. So I said, if the grade is greater than or equal to 0, and the grade, let me highlight these here. If the grade is greater than or equal to 0, and the grade is less than 100, if that's true, we're going to start down the tree of of filtering A's and B's out. If it's false, we'll print out that it was an invalid grade entry and the grades must be between 0 and 100. So we have the false side of that. Now inside the true, we start our sieve. If the grade is greater than 90, we print an A, and we do an else if. So Java has the ability that if we're in an else, we can immediately check another if statement. And the first thing after an if statement is the truth. So we'll go system.out.println, and this prints the B. And I'm going to continue with else if statements then to build the rest of my sieve, or sieve. I never know what the correct pronunciation is. My apologies. And so now if this were true, I get my print out my C, but if it's false, I have to check if it's a D. And then if that's true, we'll system.out.println D. But now I don't need any more if statements. And again, looking back at our flowchart, we have an if this is true, print A, else if this is true, print B, else if this is true, print C, else if this is true, print D, else we'll print F immediately. And so when we get to the D here, right after we get to D, we can have an else, and we can print out the F. And we now have nested our sieve in this statement. And so we have a sieve that sieves out the values as they come through. Once we get below 60, everything's an F, so we don't need any more else ifs. And at the end here, I now want to clean up. And for me, that's closing the input statement. And so we should have a good flow. Now I want to check this program. Now, so checking programs like this, when I go to run it, I'm looking at my input at the bottom. Please enter a numerical grade. So I want to check every possibility. So the first thing is I'll see if it's what happens if it's greater than 100. So I'll put 532.891. 532.891. And it says it's an invalid grade entry. Grades must be between 0 and 100. Notice I forgot an N in my error statement. I'll fix that now. So I did the first check. I checked the upper bound. Let's check the lower bound. So I'll put negative 3.215. An invalid grade entry. Now I want to check valid version. So 25.4 should be an F. And I get an F. I want to check the boundary between F and D is 60. So I'm going to type in 60. And that's correct. That should be the D. So let's check a 63.4 in D. So we check our way up through every values. When you're testing your own code, you know how it should run, but sometimes there might be values the user enter in that are odd. So you should go through and check any of the if statements. You should try to see an output for each if statement, and you should also check the boundaries of if statements. You want to make sure 70 is processed properly. Let's see. Let's try. I got my D's. I got the boundary on the D's. So 73.4. 80 is the boundary on the B. That works. 87.8856. Still a B. And now I need the boundary on the A, so 90. But A also has an upper boundary of 100, so 100 should work. Good. And 94.8. And so we've checked our whole program. We've checked through everything, and it does what we want it to do. It takes the user input and makes decisions based on it, and in the process, outputs a valid grade entry. I mean, there are some things we could do to improve the flow of this as we learn other commands, but this is a good idea of looking at the logic of how to process multiple conditions on a singular value. Our new thing here is compounding an if statement. This is checking to make sure both things are true. All right, I'll do a little bit of a lecture on the other forms we can see within if structures, and then we'll do some more example programs.